Welcome to the Savage Nation. There are only two questions on everyone's mind. Do you fear radioactive contamination will reach the United States? And should the United States cease building nuclear power plants? Of course, there's another question, which is, should American forces be in Japan aiding with relief efforts? So we can say we have three questions for today on the Savage Nation. Do you fear radioactive contamination will hit the United States of America? Should the U.S. cease building nuclear power plants? And should American forces be in Japan aiding with relief efforts at this time? The phone number here is 1-800-449-8255. Let's begin with some of the facts. Now, there's a great mass hysteria being disseminated by the media, and I can understand why. Most people in the media do not have degrees in science. Moreover, very few people in science know anything about nuclear science or nuclear engineering. I included. I may have a PhD, which is a high-quality one, but it's not in the nuclear sciences. However, I have listened to enough propaganda to tell you that we better get to the truth, because I am seeing reports from various and sundry people who are posing as experts on nuclear issues, who really work for the Council on Foreign Relations, they work for the Plowshares Fund, and they work for other radical left-wing groups that are simply using this massive tragedy to proliferate their lies. And we're going to talk about the issues from a scientific point of view as best we can with two experts, possibly on both sides of the issue. I'm not sure whether or not the radiation could spread to the U.S. West Coast in any significant amounts, personally. I'm going to give you my answer. I have read most everything that I could get my hands on. I believe that the threat is minimal. However, there's a couple of hysterics out there, such as a nuke expert Joe Cirincione, who says that radiation from Japan's multiple potential nuclear meltdowns could spread to the U.S. West Coast, and that the threat represents an unprecedented crisis. I don't agree with that. Cirincione was on Fox News with Meatloaf Jr., Chris Wallace, spreading the propaganda, and he said, oh, yes, it could happen. It could travel thousands of miles. Chernobyl, which happened, blah, 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 and he went on. And he said, we've never had a situation like this before. Now, it is possible that radiation could reach the United States. However, it's very unlikely that it would reach the United States in any amount to cause any problem. But before we go into the facts of the radioactivity issue, I want to tell you who this so-called nuclear expert is, Joe Cirincione, who was on Fox News as some expert. You'd expect this kind of bad reporting from Meatloaf Jr. His father was no better. The fact is that Joseph Cirincione, who is spreading this propaganda, in my opinion, is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He's a member of the far-left International Institute for Strategic Studies. He has absolutely no credentials in science whatsoever. He holds a Master of Science degree from Georgetown School of Foreign Service in, guess what? In foreign service, not in science, not in engineering. And so that doesn't mean he's a stupid man. He's probably a very smart man indeed. But he's the author of various and sundry anti-nuclear papers and books, such as Bomb Scare against nuclear weapons. He's against all nuclear weapons, and he has been a backroom guy for various and sundry left-wingers. And so, therefore, be very careful what you hear and what you take to heart on Fox News as well as anywhere else. This is not to say that radiation could not spread to the U.S. West Coast. However, at this time, I think it's very unlikely, number one. And number two, if it did reach the United States West Coast, it would be so dispersed by that point that it would be of no threat whatsoever. That would be my let us say, educated guess. It doesn't mean that I'm 100% right either, because it's not over. Now, I want to go into the earthquake itself. The Loma Prieta earthquake in California in the 80s was a 6.9 on the Richter scale. Remember, Loma Prieta was a 6.9. The blowout in Japan was approximately 20 times larger. It was an 8.9. Now you say, wait a minute, 6.9 to 8.9 is 2 times higher. No, it's not the way it works. Each point on a Richter scale goes up 1 time, not 0.1 of a time. Just put these two numbers in your head. The earthquake in Japan was an 8.9. The earthquake in California was a 6.9. You should know, and this is the good news, that the earthquake that hit Japan, which was 7 times more powerful than the worst earthquake that the nuclear power plant was built for, okay, shows us that Japanese engineering was superb and everything held up. Because when the earthquake hit with an 8.9, the nuclear reactors all went into automatic shutdown. Within seconds after the earthquake started, the moderator rods had been inserted into the core, and nuclear chain reaction of the uranium was stopped. That is very good news. You should understand that there's good news here. The media is only spreading propaganda and hysteria and bad news to frighten you. And I am telling you that you've got to get some of the facts before you start making some decisions. Because let us not forget who the big winner is here. The big winner here is Barack Hussein Obama and the other Marxists of the Alinsky school. This is not to say they caused it. You got to understand something. Obama's born with a lucky star over his head. This is going to work directly for Obama's radical left-wing agenda. He didn't cause it, obviously, but as we well know from Rahm Emanuel's famous statement, they certainly are not going to let this crisis go unused. And already they're using it. Now they've shut down the oil drilling, as you well know, in the Gulf of Mexico as a result of the horrendous spill, which, by the way, they let get out of control for almost a month before they did anything about it. In order to shut down the drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, they let the oil spread. That we know. Okay, number one. So they've cut off all drilling, all further drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. What do you think is going to happen now as a result of the Fukushima blast? What do you think is going to happen now? I think what's going to happen is the hysterics and the liars from the radical left-wing think tanks, such as Plowshares and such as the CFR, are going to be disseminated all over the media, and idiot gobblers like Chris Wallace on Fox News are going to take it whole. They're going to gobble it all up and say, therefore we should build no nukes. Not so fast. That's not the proper conclusion. There's a number of major concessions that have to be granted on either side of the argument before you can come to that conclusion. And I'm going to get into all of them. I can't do it all in the first 4 minutes of the radio show. So be very careful who you're listening to. Be very careful what conclusions you draw. Just understand that the big winner is Nancy Pelosi and her green energy geniuses who stand to make trillions of dollars selling untested, unproven, unworkable energy sources that won't be ready for between 17 and 70 years. But this works again for Obama's agenda, and we have to put that out right at the start of this. The phone number here is 1-800-449-8255. We're talking, of course, about one thing and one thing only, although there are many other stories, including the brutal murder of 5 Israelis by a bloodthirsty Palestinian who broke into their home on Saturday, stabbed a mother and father to death in their bed, and then butchered their little children down to the age of 4 months, stabbing a 4-month-old to death, as well as her brother and sister, leaving them in pools of blood. Not covered by any of the vermin in the media. We understand the magnitude of the tragedy of Japan is far worse, but a life is a life. And unless you understand that there's an agenda in the media on virtually every policy question in the country, you're not going to get to the truth, and you're not going to be able to draw the proper conclusion. The way the storyline works is the Palestinians are victims, the Jews are Hitler. And I'm not buying it. I'm not going to accept it. I'm not going to sit here and listen to this rubbish anymore. That was a designated hit on a family. Mother, father, and children down to the age of 4 months. Right away, the left wing can say, yeah, but Israeli bombs kill Palestinian children. That's unfortunately true. But they're not targeting innocent Israeli children. Huge difference, my friend. And if you don't understand that difference, then hang up and don't listen to the show. And I don't even want to talk about it. All I want to do is put the news out there for those of you who are so brainwashed, you don't know right from wrong, up from down, left from right, and black from white. I want to go back to the issue of, should the U.S. cease building nuclear power plants? Do you fear radioactive contamination will hit the United States? Again, some facts. Loma Prieta earthquake in California in the 80s was 6.9 on the Richter scale. The earthquake in Japan was an 8.9. That is not 2 times larger. It is 20 times greater than the one in California. This is a massive earthquake. It's probably an unprecedented earthquake. And again, I want to repeat that there is very good news here. When the earthquake hit the Fukushima reactors, with an 8.9, the reactors all went into automatic shutdown, and within seconds after the earthquake started, the moderator rods had been inserted into the core, and nuclear chain reaction of the uranium was stopped. That's very important for you to understand. Then something bad happened after that. I'll be right back.